everybody, happy Thursday. Welcome to Lunchtime Live. I'm Pia from Stitches and Stitches and Scraps, and this is episode 75. So for those of you who are new here, Lunchtime Live is basically my video newsletter. So I'm going to tell you everything that's going on at Stitches and Scraps and what's coming up, what I'm working on, and then we'll get into a demo portion. Hi Beth, good to see you. So for 2022, what I've decided to do is a stitch of the week, and I'm alternating between knit and crochet stitches. So 2 weeks ago, I showed you guys how to crochet the thermal stitch with just single crochet thermal stitch. There is a half double crochet variation, and because half double crochet has that extra third loop to play with, there's so many variations you can do with the half double crochet thermal stitch. So we're going to play a little bit today with some of those variations. But first, let me tell you what's new on the blog. So I showed you guys last week this bag. This is the first bag in the Bag Along Cal. Bag Along, Crochet Along. It's a long word to say. And I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this, only because it's felted now. But I want to show you what the tutorial is. Hang on, let me switch over here. Okay. So where this color change is, I wanted it to be really sharp and crisp and neat. So I used a row of surface crochet over the color change. And you can't even really see it now that it's felted, but on the blog is the tutorial that goes along with this pattern, the first tutorial, and that shows how to do this this surface crochet over the color change. Now, the way the bag's folded, there's a matching seam. There's one seam with the color change and one seam with an actual sewn seam. The whole reason that I decided to do the surface crochet was to make those two sides match really nicely. So this tutorial is how to surface crochet over the color change. Then we'll have another tutorial, which is the main one, that shows how to fold the bag and assemble all of it. And then there'll be a third tutorial, the last one, about how to surface crochet over the seam so that it matches the color change surface crochet. So that's coming up, but the tutorial for surface crocheting over the color change is up already. That went up yesterday, 2 days ago, something like that. So that's what's going on there. The other thing I'm working on, and this was prompted by someone on a Lunchtime Live saying, could you do a double knit project? They wanted me to do a double knit hat, but we're getting near the end of the season, so I decided to do a double knit ear warmer. Special for Valentine's Day. So it should be done just in time for you to make it for Valentine's Day. I'm hoping to have it out next week. This is the pattern so far. I got most, oh, that's upside down. There we go. I got most of the double knitting done. Actually, I got all the double knitting done. And I just have to do the edge. Now I'm actually, there's the other side. I'm actually going to back this edge out and redo it because I started with the decreases up at the top and then had the even section here. But I'm thinking if I start with the decreases here and then have it go even up at the top here, up in the middle, then you can adjust the size more easily by adding or removing some of those even rows. So I'm thinking I'm going to change it. What I might do is just, yeah, I think what I might do is just do the increases only at the beginning and then have the extra come up and meet those increases. Yeah, we're gonna see, but I'm probably gonna rip out this section and redo it and attach it back so that I can show you properly. And I'm working on tutorials for that, and I should have that done. I should have that posted next week. But I have something very exciting this weekend, and this is personal, but I'm sharing anyway because it means that I'm not going to be around if you have questions or comments. I'll probably check in here and there, but my friend Mary Beth Temple, who is also a crochet designer from way back, and you probably, well, current and way back, I'm just meaning she goes back a long time before me. She's been in the industry a while. She just got a new job at Annie's, and that involved moving from very, very far away from me to very, very close to me. She's now just the next state over and only about a 4-hour drive. So I told her that I'm coming over this weekend to help her unpack. I don't know how much unpacking is actually going to happen, but we haven't seen each other in 3 or 4 years, and I just needed to see her. So there's going to be a lot of hanging out happening. I'm not so sure how much unpacking is going to happen, but we'll try. But I'm going up there tomorrow, and I'll be gone all the way through the weekend. I won't get back until Sunday night. So if you need me, I just may be a little slower to respond because we're having some girl time. So that's what's going on for me this weekend. And then next week, I hope to have that ear warmer out for you pretty early in next week. So let's jump right into the demo portion. I am going to switch over to this camera. Okay, sweet. And let me zoom in a little bit. Okay, so we looked before at, this is single crochet thermal stitch. This is when somebody just says thermal stitch, this is pretty much what they mean. Okay, so then this is double crochet or half double crochet thermal stitch. Look just at this portion. I can't even fold it because I did too little of it. Just at these few rows down here. Okay, this is 6 rows because remember it's a double thick fabric, so it's 6 rows or 8 rows I did of this. Do you see these lines here? Those are the extra third loops from the half double crochet. So you get this same fabric, but with this very emphasized horizontal line. So it takes this kind of almost waffle texture and turns it into a horizontal stripe texture when you do it with a half double crochet. You can see the stitches aren't that much smaller, or I mean, sorry, that much bigger. That's because you're still folding them over to pick up those lower loops. So you're still getting a really crunched stitch. It just has a little bit more fabric in it because it's got that extra loop on every row. So it's not so much taller as it is thicker and a little more dense. Now you can make it, well, this part is slightly taller. This part here is the first variation where I actually used that back loop and crunched it up so it's just like a single crochet. And that's even more dense. It's a little different look still. It still doesn't look the same. But so I'm going to show you those variations. And then when we get up here, I started really playing with the back loops and trying different things. So I'm going to show you some of what I tried. But let's get into, first I got to show you the basics, right? So let me show you how to do half double thermal crochet the right way, and then I'll play with it and show you all the millions of other ways. Okay, and there may be a pattern coming out of this soon because I was having fun. So I'm going to do 15 stitches this time to give me some extra stitches to play with. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and then one more for the turning chain. Cool. Okay, so now the first row is just half double crochet, and you can go into whichever loops you like to go into. We talked a lot about changing the look of the bottom edge depending on which loops you choose to use in your foundation row. If you want to see about that, go back to the single crochet. I'm not going to repeat all of that here because it's the same for the half double crochet one. You can get different loops on the bottom depending on how you work into these chain stitches and on how you work into the leftover loops. So for this one, I'm just doing 15 half double crochet into just one loop of the chain. Okay, so that's just a row of half double crochet. Now comes the thermal stitch. You see these extra loops left over from the chain? I'm going to be working into those. So I have chained 1, and remember it's half double crochet, so we do the yarn over first. And just like single crochet thermal stitch, we're going to go into the back loop only on the top, and the leftover loop, or loops in this case because I left 2 chains, but I'm just going to do this one leftover loop here on the bottom. Pull up a loop in both of those and finish your half double crochet. So let's continue, one here, Okay, and you can see how it folds the fabric over. When you do that, the fabric starts to fold like this. That's what makes it that double thick fabric that gives you the thermal crochet. So this is just traditional half double crochet, thermal crochet. HDC thermal crochet to be shorter. Now it's really hard to not get, or it's really easy to not get into the right loop. So be careful when you're picking up your loops. It's really easy to go there, but it's not there. There's one over here. So make sure that you're not skipping one, because then you'll get to the end and you'll not have a loop to work into and you'll be like, what happened? Can you tell that's happened to me a few times? I was playing a lot yesterday with this stitch. I'm going to do one more row of regular thermal crochet after this because I want to show you how it works when you're not working into the chain, but it's very similar to this. And then we'll start playing with the back loops. Thermal crochet is kind of a slow stitch, so this section, this demo might take longer than my normal ones. Okay, and then one more right there. And then you always want to count and make sure you didn't miss one. I should have 15. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I'm good. Okay. So there's my 15 stitches for the, there's my 15 stitches for the first row. Now, look at the half double crochet. Do you see that yarn over there? Let me zoom in a little more. So this was the stitch that you picked up in the stitch below, or the loop that you picked up in the stitch below. This was the loop that was already on your hook when you started. And this diagonal line here comes from the yarn over. On the back, that diagonal line is horizontal, and that is your third loop. So you can see here, this, if I pull on this, that is this horizontal line right here. Okay, so that is the third loop of this stitch. This is the front and back loops. So these are the two loops you're used to, and then this is the third loop. So when you're turning your work, the third loop goes from the back to, because here it's on the back, to being in the front, right? But the third loop from the previous row, this one is now going to be in the back. Okay, so what we're going to do for this, we're going to chain one. We're going to work into, this is the third loop from the previous row. We're going to work into that back loop and just the front loop of the previous row, just that skipped front loop. Okay. Oops, sorry, I forgot to do my half double. There we go. So you don't want to work into both for a traditional half double crochet. You're just working into one. I'm pointing out that back loop because it's important for some of the variations we're going to work on. And that back loop that gets, or that third loop that gets left behind, that's what becomes those horizontal lines that you see here. It's more visible after a few rows, so I'm going to show you a few rows. Okay, am I back? Am I back? Can you see me now? Okay, sorry, don't know what happened. My stream got interrupted, I think internet, but I should be back. Okay, and I zoomed out, Beth, so I shouldn't move out of the picture anymore. I had zoomed in way too far, but okay, so now I'm working on these thermal half double crochets, and I'm going to do a few rows just so you can see a little better. Actually, I'll do one more row after this. So you can see the extra loop that gets left behind. Okay. All right, so now here you see clearly the two loops, the third loop and the front loop from the previous row, right? So when we work here, again, we're just working for the standard one, we're just working into the front loop that was left behind. We're not working into that third loop. So we're just working into the front loop here. This is the last row I'll do of the plain one. So I'm going kind of fast because then I'll show you some fun variations. So yeah, it's a little confusing to say what's back loop and what's front loop, because when you turn your work, what was back loop becomes front loop and vice versa. So if you're getting caught up on that, basically there's 2 loops here and you're going to work in the one that's on top. The other one is the 3rd loop. Okay. And there we go. I think I might have lost a stitch somewhere along the way, but there we go. Okay, so now you can see you're starting to get that ridge that, let me zoom in a little more again. You're starting to get that ridge here that you notice here from the 3rd loops. All right, so that is the basic half double crochet thermal stitch. So now let's play, because you know, if you tell me to leave the 3rd loops alone, I'm going to be like, well, but what if you go into the 3rd loops? What happens then? So the first thing I tried when I was playing was I said, what happens if I go into this loop here and both of these loops here? Okay, instead of just the one. Well, what happens is it's really tight and it's hard to get into. There we go. What happens is this connection here gets really thick, right? Because it's got 3 loops in it now. So that gets really thick and you lose the stripiness. So let's do a few more of those. And so you end up with a really dense stitch that's similar to what the single crochet one looks like, but it has a slightly different look to it. I'm not even sure why it gets a slightly different look. It just does. I think because one of the legs is at more of an angle or something like that. But you can see now I'm working through both of these loops. Okay. And on the next row I'll do something different. But yeah, never be afraid to play. There's so much fun to be had in playing with stitches. If they say don't do this, do it and see what happens. Because that's how you find new things, right? Okay, so when I look at this now, you can see that that line is gone, right? There's no more little line. This one on this side had this vertical or this horizontal line, and here there's no more line, okay, because you've picked that up. And this is what it looked like on the single crochet swatch. And the part that I'm saying looks different is, see, these legs look like the back of a single crochet, whereas these look like the front of a single crochet. And I'm not sure why that happens, but I think it's the way the yarn's twisted or something. But that's what happens if you work into both loops. Now, the neat part is the exact same thing happens if you work just into this top loop and the 3rd loop. If you skip this loop entirely and work just into the 3rd loop, oops, sorry, forgot my yarn over. There we go. You work just into the 3rd loop, you get the same result as far as the way the stitch looks. It's a little, maybe slightly less dense right where it connects, but you still have that loop caught up in there. So it's not any thinner really. So whichever way you find easier to work the stitch, either going into both of those loops or just the 3rd loop, gives you exactly the same result. And I found it easier to go into just that 3rd loop, but certainly, you know, whichever one you prefer actually gives you the same look with such a slight difference in texture that it's not noticeable, and you can do whichever one you prefer. Okay, I'm getting to the end of the row so I can show you. Uh-oh, I hear the natives are restless upstairs. My doggie is running around. Okay. So this was what we did before where we worked into both loops. And this is what it looks like now when we work into just the front loop. It's really no different. It's so similar. But then I thought, okay, now what if we combine the two? What if sometimes we work just into the top one, just into the skipped front or back loop, whatever you're calling it, and leave the third loop alone? And sometimes we work into the third loop or both loops either way. Well, what happened with that, and I'll show you one row, but it takes several rows to really see the pattern. Actually, I think you can see it a little better if I zoom out more. Let's see which. Our internet keeps going out. Sorry about that. Okay, so this right here is what I just showed you, these two rows. So starting with this row, look at how here I have a third loop, here I don't have a third loop. Here I have a third loop, here I don't have a third loop, okay? Here I have a third loop, here I don't have a third loop. This gives you almost like a seed stitch texture because I alternated that. And what that was alternating between working into the third loop and not working into the third loop. So here what I did was on one row, I went, okay, I'm going to work into the third loop first. And then I'm going to work into this top loop for the next one. Okay, third loop, top loop. Do you see the difference there, which loop I'm picking up? Third loop, top loop. Third loop, top loop. Okay. And yeah, I'll go all the way to the end. Third loop, top loop. So I really like this texture actually, and it's almost meditative, but you have to be careful that you're staggering it. Otherwise you get, well, unless you want vertical lines, but if you don't stagger it, you get almost a ribbed-like texture, or at least I think you do. Let me get this one done. I'm actually going to try that on this sample here for you. Okay, so this one, you can see how it goes backwards and forwards, right? The ones that were worked into the third loop kind of stick out in front of the ones that were not worked into the third loop. So I think if I keep those lined up, see here I had it staggered, so you got more of like that back and forth seed stitch texture, right? I think if I keep them lined up here, I'll get almost a ribbing texture. So let's try that and see. And this is the fun of swatching. When people say swatching is fun, this is why swatching is fun, because you get to play around with things like this. And I know right now that several people are groaning at me when I say swatching is fun. Okay, so I think I'm going to have to do 2 more rows to see them stacked. So let's do 2 more rows. Let's see. Let's start the same way. Let's start all the rows the same way. So we're starting with going in the third loop, and then we're going into that top loop only. And then the third loop. Beth, you agree with me, right? Swatching is fun? Tell me swatching is fun and I'm not insane. Ah, Beth's not responding. I don't think Beth thinks swatching is fun. Okay. So this is the exact same thing I did on the last row. I'm just kidding. I'm insane. Yes, I know. But this is how you get to play and develop new things, right? You get to try all the different variations of something when you work on a swatch like this. Okay, so this one is just a repeat of the last row, because remember, this is a double-sided fabric. So I actually have to work 2 rows to see it stack, because you don't see this row on this side of the fabric. So let me do another one. But I make it look fun. I promise it is. It really is. It's boring if you're just swatching to match gauge, but if you're swatching to play. Oh, I love it. Okay, so now let me be really careful here. Okay, so this one was worked into the third loop. This one must have been worked into the third loop. So I'm going to start by working in the third loop. Good, so that, is that even the third loop? That's the third loop. Hard to see on the end one, right? I think the end one doesn't matter much anyway. There. Okay, so now this one is not the third loop. And this one is the third loop. And I want to see if I get sort of a ribbed effect. We don't know. It may not happen. It may not happen, but it's worth trying, right? I also have been playing around with the idea, and Beth knows this because I talked about it at my last guild meeting, but I've been playing around with the idea that because each row only shows on one side of the fabric, I think you could do colorwork designs where you had two different colors, two different designs on the two different sides of the fabric. So you could basically make two completely separate colorwork designs on one joined fabric. And I still have to try that to see if it works for a larger piece. I think there might be some bleed through though. That's my main concern, is if there's a little bleed through of color. But if there is, then I'm thinking you could use that bleed through as a design feature and maybe make like an ombre sort of a thing instead. So we'll see. Okay. Well, I didn't really get a ribbed pattern, but it's definitely an interesting texture that is different from the standard one, right? Because the standard one has these horizontal lines that go across like this, and then if you stagger you get almost a seed stitch texture, and this is, it's different. I wouldn't call it like a ribbing for sure, but it's definitely different. So then, and I'm not going to bore you with going through this because you get the idea, right? Sometimes you work in the front and sometimes you don't, and that's really, sorry, in the third loop, and sometimes you don't, and that's how you get different designs, right? So on this one I had the idea, okay, what if I do bigger sections? So here I have 3 stitches where I left the third loop open, okay, and I didn't work into it. And then 3 stitches where I did work into it. And then 3 stitches where I didn't work into it, okay? So now I have these like larger sections, right? And you can see where I have them stacked over here, you get kind of a stripy texture. And where I have them staggered, which I did by working a few extra over here, I got a staggered section, and you can see where that staggers. And I think the texture is a little more visible when you zoom out. But that's definitely another almost waffle kind of texture that I liked playing with. And then finally, and this is a little extra here, I thought, what if I can figure out a way to do some sort of extended half double crochet that goes down a row into the third loops left behind on the previous row. So I did that, and this was the stitch I came up with for that. I'm going to show that to you right here. And this is not an actual real stitch that anybody does. It's just something I was playing around with. So I want to work into this row down here. So I need kind of a tall stitch, almost a double crochet, but I still need it to look like a half double on top because I need to have that third loop to work into for the next row. Oh, that's cool. You can really see the texture at an angle like that. See all the texture bumps? So anyway, totally cool. Okay, so what I'm going to do for this one is I'm going to work into the top loop like normal, okay, with that yarn over. So this is like the half double part, okay, and go ahead and pull up a loop. So there's for my half double. Now I'm going to come down here to this other stitch. I'm going to go ahead and pull up a loop in that one, okay, chain 1, or not chain 1, go through 2. There we go. Yarn over and go through 2, and then I've got 3 left on my hook. Yarn over and go through all 3. So that's like the extended thermal half double I came up with that gives you almost that post stitch effect. But the cool part is you get the post stitch effect on one side and totally flat on the other side. So I'm thinking that you could do cable designs or something similar to a cable design with this kind of an extended stitch where it only shows on one side and it's totally flat on the other side. So those are the things I'm playing with. But again, this part down here, that first thing I showed you, that is the actual, if somebody says half double crochet, thermal crochet, this is what they're talking about down here. All the rest of this was just playing around fun. And I hope you have fun with it too. So play around and show me what you guys come up with. Think about what it would look like with different colors and what it would look like with working into this loop or that loop or you know, groups of stitches, all of that. That's how you end up designing new textures. And that, for me, is what's super fun about crochet. Just working with the same things over and over again. Frankly, it's just arranging the same stitches in different patterns, and that gets a little bit boring after a while. But when you can play around and do tweaks to it and try something new, that's when it gets really, really exciting. And that's all I have for you this week. So if you have any questions on that, feel free to reach out. But again, remember, I'm leaving tomorrow and I won't be back until late Sunday night. So I may be a little harder to reach this weekend. And hopefully I'll get some pictures and I'll share them. And then I will see you guys next week. And next week we are doing, what did I put for next week? I believe next week is the broken rib stitch. Let me double check that. Yes, next week I'm doing the knit broken rib stitch. So I will see you for that next week. Bye. Thanks, Beth. Yes, I think we're going to have lots of fun. Okay, I'll see you later. Bye.